We're on the way,
Right.
Brian.
Yeah, this is the long-awaited Nick and Brian. We're back in action. Just take it easy with all those hand movements,
Yeah.
Nick. Can overwhelm us. And actually, we've had a lot of, by way of introduction, we better say that this video is going to be kind of directed to our hidden reality, our friends on the other side of the world who discuss and debate with a fury the pressing issues of the day. And actually, I've been noting Nick's been nudging the group in a certain direction, and I think probably rightly so. What I was thinking about, and it's probably the obvious, the most simple solution is the answer to the problem, and of course no one wants to really look at it. And that is that if we split our analysis, but we can't say, absolutely separate religious from the secular, but we have to work these two, because there's actually, like, we'll call the religious the upstairs and the secular the down, and that the downstairs has had a lot of impact on what's happening, but we haven't been thinking about it too much, really, have we, Nick?
Oh, it's,
Well, you have.
I have. Yeah, I've been watching what you've all been posting, what you've all commented, gents and Hal. It's been bloody fascinating, to put it bluntly. We're sitting out here in the middle of the Pacific Ocean pretending that we're immune to this kind of thing, but
We're not.
I actually transposed it. I had a bit of a run-in on blogs with a Marxist guy who still believes in the historic dialectic according to Marx, and he thought that the whole of this Paris event was down to a failure of capitalism. And in a way he's right, and in a way he's wrong. What he couldn't actually get around to was what Brian's been saying, which is that no one person holds the truth, and there may be multiple truths going on this. And they can run in parallel concurrently. So what I basically said to him was, look, if you don't understand Wahhabism, you won't understand the motivating drivers of these young men who are doing these things. But having said that, why do they become Wahhabis? Maybe you've got a point that it's got to do with disaffection with capitalism or whatever. Or maybe you could look at it from another viewpoint, which is, young men just got a lot of anger and blood they want to boil and put in some direction. If they've got one vision and someone gives them a better vision, they'll go that way. There's so many strands going into it, which is, I suppose, what Brian and I are trying to do is just sort of say, well, not even what's the most important, but how you actually deconstruct this so you come up with a positive response and you can come up with an answer.
Well, I was thinking, actually, I've been listening to one of my favourite sociological commentators, Sociology of Religion, Peter Berger, and I thought his example of driving a car was quite good. So we'll take a Jew and a Muslim and a Buddhist and a Christian, and they're all having to drive the same car. So we're going to have a secular discourse on what's necessary to drive that car. It's no use us talking religion about driving the car. Okay, so we've got to find an area where there's a secular, totally secular discourse, and we'll all be in on it. So we've got, and of course, if that doesn't happen, well, the obvious can take place. It is actually the most simple solution to a problem, and of course, I think philosophically, it's often the best solution, is that you get a simple answer. And I've come around to thinking that while we're not discounting religious issues, and I'm sure Nick's not going to either, but what we are saying is that there are some secular or common drivers affecting the whole issue. And that is that these people only get recruited because they're not going anywhere downstairs.
Yeah, and I...
the car's sitting there, and they haven't got, the ability to drive it. And obviously they're going to be pissed off if, say, a Christian jumps into the car and drives off, and they can't do that.
Yeah. So I mean, if you look at the guys who did the jobs in Paris, they're all Parisians or French, third generation, second generation from North Africa, and they've grown up in housing estates where the chances of them ever getting a job or a meaningful life are very slim. and someone comes along and gives them a vision of a world which they can actually partake in. As a young man, you want to go and do something. You actually want to make your mark. You want to create something, you know, and you want to get to your middle age and say you're set up or whatever. And someone says, hey, come and be a ruler in this country over here. We're going to run a jihad and you're going to be part of it, and we're going to give you a sort of utopian version of what's going to be. And you go, well, that's better than sitting on my chuff here and taking my gyro once a week and, you know, whatever. And they go and do it. And who can blame them, you know?
Well, I think actually we definitely have grounds to argue that we can have a secular discourse on these downstairs issues. However, I'm not discounting what you're saying about meaning, because actually a meaningful life is both a religious and a secular state of affairs.
Yeah, I'd actually put it in another context. I have this argument with Marxists, and basically what I said to them, I said these ISIL jihadists are actually, while they have an ideology with, you know, a utopian vision which has to do with, you know, some ancient version of Mohammedanism, you can go back less than 100 years and you find equally aggressive young men doing equally nasty things across Europe. They were called Marxists, and they're following a revolutionary trait which these ISIL people are using, which is just called, you know, the Leninist method of revolution. Works the same way. And the way you recruit the people to do it is that you give them a picture of something which they're going to partake of, which they're actually going to be, you know, better positioned by. And you give them the target, and history will tell you they went and did it. And the Nazis used the same method with Hitler Youth. I mean, what's the fucking difference? How is it we just can't see it and actually do something about it in context?
And why is it that during the rule of the Third Reich that ordinary people didn't speak out? Because, you know, the same thing, of course, has been said about ISIS as well, is that getting this sort of culture being dragged along in the train of the whole. However, yes, no, I think that's a good point, Nick. You've made a really good point. And it's something I think we're missing, is that also the other thing is, and it is a criticism of the Islamic position, and that is that like it's sort of kind of little like Catholicism back in the 15th century. I mean, it's not tolerating any differences. And the thing is that for pluralism to work, and I think we can't avoid pluralism, we have to have absolute religious freedom. I mean, people have to have freedom to choose the kind of religious framework and adherence that they want, you know. So, and the other point that I think Berger makes very well is, you know, the fastest growing religion in the world, believe it or not, certainly not Islam, but
Pentecostal.
It's actually Protestant, evangelical Protestantism, of the flavour of the Pentecostal, flavour.
Yeah.
And the thing about that is, and it's an interesting one because Berger restated it, but one of the things is the central tenet to the evangelical Pentecostal movement is that you must be born again. You've got to actually make a choice.
You do.
Yeah. And you've got to be allowed to make a choice. And you can't be born into it. So, it's not like a denomination where you're born, like Catholic or Anglican or whatever. Yeah. And the thing is that sometimes, this may sound quite straightforward and all the rest of it, but it's actually having a huge impact. And it's something we can't overlook, because we'll just go round and round in circles on our hidden reality. We won't be able to actually make any progress unless we can actually get this thing squared away. Yeah. And I think really that what a course is going to require is sacrifice, though. Those who have to let go of a bit, so those that have not have got their share.
I think it's worse than that, actually.
Who wants to hear this message? This
is where we're going to see a lot of conflict, because I've noticed with you guys that, you're anti-EEC, and I can understand that. Most people with half a brain in Europe will be quite anti-EEC.
What do you mean by that?
what I mean by that is
Anti-C, what's your C?
anti-EEC.
Oh,
European
yeah.
Community.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So with the European Community, I think what you're seeing is you're seeing an out-of-control beast, which is, you know, it's basically gone off the rails and finding its own way without asking the will of the people. And it's very much turning into that sort of dictatorship which is unaccountable, especially in a financial sense. And that suits for people who've got money in Europe. It suits the people who are rich. But it doesn't suit the rest of you, the populace. And bringing that back under control is a major. And I worried about it quite a bit from the viewpoint of where does it leave the rest of us economically. I've got a feeling that this whole attempt to protect the property rights and the the property values and the wealth of those who've already got it is probably the biggest sticking point in actually curing any of the issues we've got with unemployment, with youth. I mean, good example, youth unemployment in Spain, 50%.
Yeah, shocking.
You know, and Italy and Portugal, how long can that go on?
No, it's totally unacceptable.
It's inequitable, and you guys are quite right in saying this is fault of the EEC and the policies, but you'll probably lose sight at the same time. The reason we had the European Community in the first place was to put a counterbalance on German aggression.
Yeah.
And what do we do about that?
Well, it's an authority structure and a power system that has actually taken on a life of its own.
Yeah.
And it's not incorporating into it, the fact that there are a huge number of individuals with diverse world views and thinking.
Yeah.
And that has to be addressed, but I think essentially more so than any of it is that this whole thing about accepting this situation, the economic situation of the haves and the have-nots is just not going to better cut the mustard. It doesn't cut the mustard in your words. Hey, Nick, what I was thinking was of looking at the little clock on the video, we've now done 12 minutes. And we might have to actually push the stop button, otherwise you'll get tired listening to us. But we really want to hear what you've got to say about this. Now, so you give us this, your take on our splitting of the analysis that we take into account that there is a secular discourse that hasn't been taking place, but there's been plenty of religious talk.